Machine, I know you're here. I can smell the insolent stench of your blood-stained hands. I await you down below. Come to me. Your kind know nothing but hunger, purged all life from the upper layers, and yet remain unsatiated. You've taken everything from me, machine. And now all that remains is perfect hatred.
This is probably my favorite way to open a layer, or maybe even a level. You'd expect it to be pretty hot in a desert, and yeah, that's well exemplified here with the omnipotent beam of light behind the pyramid shining so bright it casts a sharp shadow, resulting in a big-ass triangle. ULTRAKILL's layer openings have been historically pretty polite, giving you a moment of reprieve after whatever exhausting boss fight had put you through the moment before. But greed does not fuck around, and it is not very long before you're introduced to part 1 of 4 of 9 of ULTRAKILL's magnum opus of ball bursting, the Virtue. See, in Act 1, the difficulty really came from using your moveset to the fullest. None of the enemies really demand your full attention, except, of course, the bosses. Those are the main roadblocks.
Enemies mainly encourage movement among other good fundamentals. The street cleaner encourages you to stay in the air, while the rock shoots constant projectiles encouraging strafing. You don't have to react to any enemy attacks all of the time.
Think of it like balloons. I've also never played balloons. The banker monkey is coins, and the rocket monkey is jumping, and the The airplane is strafing. As players become acclimated with the game's mechanics, they're able to just start throwing monkeys down on autopilot. Staying in the air evolves into just putting the rocket monkey down. An experienced player will be using the rocket monkey and the airplane monkey and the banker monkey all at once. Their monkey brain is doing it for them. They don't have to react to anything. Well, not exactly. It's not mindless, but it begins to become second nature. All this is to say that the Virtue, the angel balloon, completely pops the balloon strategy right out of the gate going into Act 2. Because now, you have an enemy that can attack you from anywhere, at any time, taking up your full attention. Even worse, with like 7 of them, cyberground waves turn into a series of angelic, searing cum shots from up above. At the very least, you can have your own ball-bursting extravaganza by bursting the Virtue's ball, singular. And just like that, Virtues shoot to the very top of the enemy priority list, and the difficulty spikes. But the design of the enemy only carries so much weight. What surrounds it matters a lot for a pressure enemy like the Virtue. Even here in the Virtue's introduction, the level design is leveraged pretty well, slowly ramping up their placement until you get to this final room where the Virtues are hitting you without you being able to see them, trying to get you to panic amid all the other enemies attacking you. But they're actually just nested underneath these little shelters. Despite this, I actually P-ranked 4-1 on my very first try. Thanks guys, I've been holding that in for like 2 years. Remember when I said greed doesn't fuck around? 4-2 is really hard. I'm pretty sure that I didn't know that hard damage existed when greed came out. For the unenlightened, hard damage takes a little bit of damage taken and temporarily removes it from your maximum health. Before Sand, it was the last stand between you and just farming blood from enemies. So, when Sand did come around and completely removed your ability to get health off of enemies altogether, well, I was done. Because now I had the Stalker, who shits out sand everywhere, making it impossible to heal, and some of the hardest combat spaces in the game so far.
Oh, there's so much happening.
This level was actually made in hell. Even if these arenas didn't have sand cheek spreading stalkers everywhere, it would be hard. But it does have sand cheek spreading stalkers everywhere, and now I've got to rewire my entire brain to adapt to not being able to heal off stuff. Another huge shakeup for the Bloons mentality. These are delicately designed enemies, and in retrospect, I can really admire that. It even does the Half-Life video essayist obsessionist thing where it shows you how stalkers work in a little cage before you have to kill them. Especially when I went back to P-rank it though, I think I would have liked to just kill Hakita instead. At least the music is bonkers good here. And then, on top of that, you have to fight the Insurrectionist, who is arguably more mobile than you are. You can take this fight pretty much anywhere because he will track you down and kill you no matter where you go. Where you were once the ULTRAKILL, you are now the mouse in Cat and Mouse. All you can really do is whittle him down because he has so much health, even when he appears in the cyberground. It's actually a really good fight despite how much I fucking hate this guy's guts. Dude doesn't even need his own arena, he's a fucking ICBM. Oh, there goes New York City. I guess Honky Tonk figured people would be pretty exhausted after the heart attack extravaganza that is 4-2, so definitely by comparison, 4-3 is a walk in the park. There's this room with the 4 tables or campfires or whatever, and lighting each one spawns a couple of enemies, so you can just light them individually and take the room one step at a time. But if you have to pee really bad, get it? Then of course, you gotta light all the fires at once and turn the room into a cyberground wave so you can get out of there quickly. I don't know how much I like this whole lights out gimmick, but oh fuck. I don't know, a shot in the dark is kinda underwhelming. The darkness does give the level a unique identity, and like I kinda mentioned before, it's a slower level, which is boring replaying it individually, but as a part of a playthrough, it's probably good for pacing. If ULTRAKILL was scary all the time, it would really suck. It picks up at the end where the level gets bored of itself and just throws everything at you in a world record huge area. My first playthrough, so without the whiplash, I was just thinking the whole time, man, this would be easier if I had the whiplash. There's like shit happening at every moment in like 4 different quadrants of the arena, and if you ignore any of it, everything just gets exponentially worse. Also, it's really dark. Decent gimmick, it's okay. We're at the summit of the pyramid now. You know, the one in the first level. For the most part, ULTRAKILL's depiction of hell has been an abstraction of its own canon tailored to the player. As in, you are not literally entering Minos' body in gluttony, that's just how hell is conveying gluttony to you. I've noticed though that there's kind of a physical connection between levels at times. Like in Lust, where Minos is the constant, the through line, the landmark, piecing it all together. Since in 2.1 you see the city down there, and then in 2.2 you're in the city, and then you just keep going down from there, only getting closer to Minos. For Lust, this helps to better represent itself as a city, as a lived-in place grander than the scope of each level permits. But it's still loose enough that the abstract nature of hell remains visible. And this happens in Greed too. Each level is progressing towards the pyramid that Sisyphus and his goons drag a bunch of stuff up. At the very start of 4.1, the pyramid's right there, made a big stink about it earlier. And then you go down to 4.2, and there's the pyramid right there. And then in 4.3, you're in the basement of it, I guess. And then you go up, and now we're probably at the summit of the pyramid for the climax. I think I'm gonna climax.
Oh my god, it's
I'm you! What a loser. I always thought the V2 fight was kinda weird. It's fun, it's good, yeah, but there's a reason it's such an erect roadblock for new players. No enemy is this fast, this small, and has this much health all at once. Most enemies just stand there, waiting for their evisceration. He seems so complicated at first, but a lot of this is on paper, and in practice, it's just a lot of fun even to lose. And then to be able to unfold his layers of depth later on. That's probably 100% actually, because I had about 9 months to refine my skills, but I don't know. I feel like I struggle a little bit when I replay the first fight. You have just a few more tools this time around. The pillars rise and fall throughout the fight, but they can't be destroyed. He uses the nail gun now, but the nails attract to your magnets. Especially giving is the ability to ricochet his coins, which you can absolutely abuse. Then he jumps through a wall like a little bitch and oh yeah, we were in a pyramid and now we're on a pyramid, holy fuck! This is the most striking set piece in the entire game, and it's not on rails or anything at all besides the lack of jumping. It's just wacky and cool. And you can rocket ride in it now. Like I said, I thought the fight overall was pretty easy. You win, he just fucking dies. He doesn't drop a reboot card or anything. A lot of people think he's coming back. He's not. Oh look, he dropped a new arm. Holy fuck, it's a grappling hook.
Oh! Yo! Oh my god!
So yeah, the arm is good too. I don't know what else to say about it. It flows into combat nicely, it has some cool tech. I guess my only complaint is that personally, I don't know how to use it in earlier levels that weren't designed around it. But that's okay, because although everything has a use, it doesn't mean you have to use everything. So I'm not gonna complain that I can't use the whiplash in these couple of levels. And that's the end of Greed. A balls to the wall change up for the game and a good introduction into what Act 2 was gonna be like. Greed was released individually from the rest of Act 2, so there's about a year gap between Greed's release and new mainline campaign content. So the wait began. They added a pretty cool saw gun and Crash Bandicoot to hold us over, but it wouldn't be until August 16th that the update that included Wrath and Heresy finally released, which I'm just gonna call the Yay Finally update because patch 11 just sounds sad. August 16th is an important date because it was the only release date announced before release. Most of the time, shit gets dropped, sometimes with a warning, usually not. It actually made the waiting process worse. Probably not for people with lives, but I have nothing better to do than wait. So does the rest of the community, it seems. There was a guy who had a dream of what Heresy looked like, and then he drew it, and he was kinda close if you spin around 60 times and squint your eyes and turn off the lights. Then that drawing got added to like a schizophrenic corkboard of different leads we had on and what would be in the update, with lines and arrows connecting shit that had no correlation to each other. It was not all thumbtacks and red yarn, however. This is the part of the video where I talk about community drama. Year-old community drama, in fact. And I don't bring it up just because I'd like to see the world burn, dragging people's names through mud and bringing back long-abused arguments. I'm gonna avoid specifics. I just think that talking about these particular issues can bring interesting insights into ULTRAKILL's game design, and also touch on how scarily rabid the community is a little bit. The whiplash, for example, was changed to apply hard damage while it's being used. This was alongside an overall style rank meter overhaul that included quicker removal or regeneration of hard damage at higher style ranks. So you can't just spam it anymore, and if you're doing good, you can reap some direct rewards. That is a good change, right? The change was revealed in a teaser, so before it even came out, a lot of people were saying it would make the whiplash useless. And when it did come out, the game was review bombed for fucking adding it. ULTRAKILL had previously held the top spot for the highest percentage of positive reviews on Steam. Say goodbye to that. This was even with a patch toning down the harshness of the hard damage. I think people misunderstood the purpose of the whiplash, or at least how it sits currently. It is possible that it tickles intention with the whiplash in the same way that these angry individuals see it, that prior to this change it was a way of enhancing movement, allowing for potentially much bigger arenas, and a way to get health easier. Seeing how players could abuse it to mindlessly grab up health, possibly observing it while developing levels around it, and just seeing it occur in the cybergrind though, the developer's intention might have shifted. ULTRAKILL generates its fun from the balloons formula I talked about before. You gotta use all your monkeys, all your weapons. But the whiplash before this nerf was like the deity monkey, which was so powerful that it didn't require the use of any other monkeys. You could just plop it down and win. This could be fun for some time, but it conflicts with the consistent design ideology of ULTRAKILL. Power trips do have their place in games, just not here. The thing is, without the hard damage change, there's no reason to not use this thing all the time, and thus you ignore a lot of the other movement mechanics that make the game more interesting and hopefully fun. I get the pushback against a major change to what was presented as a completed gameplay mechanic. It's usually not a good idea to change things like that because stuff like this happens. Review bombing is crazy though, and you can turn it off if it really bothers you. There was also discussion, and I use the word discussion very loosely here, about the game's design principles. Basically, people were saying that the game's design doesn't push new players into playing in interesting and stylish ways, and since that's what ULTRAKILL is all about, it might get people to miss out on having fun.
Generally, this was attributed to a lack of challenge, letting players do whatever they wanted and win anyways.
On one hand, I see the vision. There is an arbitrary nature to just putting the letter P on a stick and holding it in front of the player. It's not a carrot and I'm not a pig. Style is an extrinsic goal that I don't have to shoot for. On the other hand, what if the world was made of pudding? I don't know anyone that thinks like this. I've introduced the game to a lot of people and watched and observed a lot of people, and no one has found the game this easy and simultaneously ignored the rest of its systems. I say ignore, but I can theoretically see how it could occur. It's just that for most people, the game is hard, even on standard, and even people who find it relatively easy still find it fun to experiment with the game's mechanics. I think changing the game in an effort to push more people into playing creatively or whatever would actively tarnish the act of doing so. The style rankings are optional, and though I think it is where ULTRAKILL thrives, it is intentionally a hidden layer to be peeled back. That hidden layer sort of expands on the balloons ideology. It's not going away. I'm going to keep bringing this up. This hidden layer of depth in ULTRAKILL unlocks a whole new array of combinations and possibilities for the game. For a lack of developed imagination, it's a sex mod for balloons. You can make the monkeys breed. This is the sniper monkey and the investor monkey breeding. And the sex, the complex layering of mechanics that you have at your disposal, is an acute form of player expression. People love player expression. It's just straight up fun to experiment with the monkeys and see what abomination comes out, with an additional little reward in the form of rank. But I guess these people aren't so fond of monkey sex. Still, it's just the words and the whims of another person. The spamming of skill issue, the framing of the stance as an incorrect opinion or whatever, and the overall obscenely negative response to this is mental. Perchance, we just need to accept that there's a flowchart of different things that can happen to different people, leading you to not click with all of ULTRAKILL. And it's not a design flaw, and it's not a skill issue. Some people will feel inclined to go back and experiment with the game's mechanics, and some people won't. I know that a lot of this is the work of a gatekeeping vocal minority, but I still think it's a good reminder, and again, can bring to light some positive stuff about the game. Anyways, at risk of derailing into a response where I angrily butt in every couple of seconds and put a soy check on the screen, I would like to talk about the video game. For some reason, when I first came into Wrath, I looked up and around very slowly, just like the reveal trailer. I think I was still trying to come to terms with actually being able to play the update instead of watching a 10-second snippet of gameplay over and over again. I might have been a little obsessed. I'm in the game! But that meant I already knew what to expect. Water. It's a water level. Personally, I don't mind the water, but it doesn't really add anything meaningful besides lower gravity and the lack of that whiplash hard damage. Which, actually, no whiplash hard damage might be bad for a first playthrough just after its introduction.
Since now you're using it for real and you're not noticing the hard damage because it's not there, so you might just forget about it. I might just be reading too much into it. It could just be an advanced mechanic to be fully understood later.
Besides the water though, the rest of the level is solid. There's no linear path to follow because of the skull hunt, so you get to bounce around between these awesome little airlocks. Each airlock has a pretty cool combat encounter. We see encounters designed around whiplash points. 5-1 is home to the only 2 encounters of 4 in the entire game with whiplash points. I was excited to see these actually used in arenas, but I can see why they've turned out to be really rare. They're just difficult to fit into the flow of combat because of how many other options you have and how limiting zipping to a point in a straight line feels in comparison. I know we just talked about how the whiplash was nerfed and people were upset, but it's not like going straight to an enemy. It's another avenue of movement that I don't normally like using. We also get to see the Mind Flayer again, who was actually completely absent in Greed, and I missed her. These encounters get even better with the introduction of the Sentry. These guys fill a similar role to the Virtue, but instead of a giant orbital laser, they shoot a teensy tiny hit scan laser that does 50 damage. The trade-off is that they're beaten by hiding behind a wall. They need line of sight. They do also have legs, and only legs. It's kind of adorable. So they'll reposition when they lose line of sight. Then, if you can't hide, you can stun them, and you have quite a few options. Not enough to trivialize the act of stunning them, but enough that you conceivably have an option to stun them even when you have no arms and no legs. Great enemy and a great introductory level for them and the layer. Then we get more water. This time we're above it at least. And there's water coming from the sky? Interestingly, there's no music, just the sound of the rain for the bulk of the level. And there's thunder too, which, thanks to a recent patch, can be weaponized using magnets. The level also features the last appearance of the Stalker in Act 2, void one very sinister exception. Its role in combat is almost replaced by the new Idol. They both modify another enemy to make it more dangerous, but don't pose much of a threat on their own. The Idol just makes them invulnerable instead of removing their blood supply. Now, I'm pretty sure the reason we only see idols and no stalkers from this point on is just because the idol is easier for the designer and the player to process. A sanded enemy can be confusing even before they're sanded. This is best highlighted in the cyber grind. Even with the beeping, there can be so much going on in the fight that it becomes hard to keep track of stalkers and prevent them from standing everything with their urine. The idol's invulnerability, on the other hand, has a clear line from the protected enemy to its source. And even if it's behind a box or in another fucking state, what to do next is pretty simple to figure out.
Oh, I found bird shit!
The idol then introduces us to the ferryman. This guy's a slippery little worm, man. He jumps around with a little spoon and he's pretty small, so he can be pretty hard to hit. Adding on to the layers of lubricant is his parry windows. Sometimes you can parry him, sometimes you can't. At least when you do, he gets struck by lightning now, but he can still be pretty overwhelming. It reminds me of V2 a little bit, though obviously he doesn't have the range attacks that V2 does. But it is a dynamic fight that keeps you on your toes in a lot of ways. We are 3 for 3 on super dynamic fights actually. The ferryman just so happened to be the protector of this cool ass ship, so in defeating him, we get to go inside. We are treated to another skull hunt for the return of the dual colored door. Again, the blue path is easier with the progression of separated fights compared to the red path throwing you into one big arena as almost a test of endurance. Oh, and that's a big ass worm. Do you think he could flip the ship? And the level doesn't stop past the dual colored door. We get a great use of the idol being in another state, a showcase of the ferryman and Gabriel's rather intimate relationship, and a scarily packed arena that just about forces you to cling to the dual weapon power-up. Of course, the real draw of this level is the 5th and final weapon. We actually had the model for the weapon around a year prior to Yay Finally, and I hypothesized based off the tubular push and pull thing going on that it would be a sort of t-shirt cannon with an air blast thing. I was sorta right. Initially, it was hard to find a use for the rocket launcher in tandem with the rest of the arsenal. Even before the update released, people were saying that the rocket launcher was useless because of how many explosive options we already had. But that air blast when you don't hit an enemy is a clue to its true use. It rewards precision. And so the rocket launcher actually does better picking off stragglers or as a combo fill than it does as an explosive splash damage attack for multiple targets. It's like a better slab piercer. The explosive part of the rocket is sort of irrelevant, except the part that makes a big explosion midair. That rewards precision and is awesome. What probably tripped people up was the alt-fire. At launch, it only had the freeze frame variant. You can use it to deal a bunch of damage to Cerberus when they wake up, but outside of that, setting up a trap has little use in fast-paced combat where enemies are coming at you from everywhere. Frozen Rocket's true purpose is for rocket riding. This fits into the game flawlessly thanks to the great controls, and also because it's fucking bonkers. You can control it completely and intuitively, use all your weapons on it, and there's tech that allows for instant mid-air riding. And since I'm months late, we now have the SRS cannon, which is really just a more potent version of the balls that Virtues drop, which I was already fond of. But these bounce and can be shot and can be projectile boosted right out of the barrel. Still figuring out how best to use it, but you can't beat a fucking cannonball conceptually, so I'm pretty happy to see this in the game.
Oh fuck, the ship is gonna sink.
Worm's not happy though. So now we get a flip version of the ship. Everything's footed, so of course we get a lovely don't touch water challenge. The second actually, in a layer themed around water. This is a great way to remix the level, and the best part is the flipping of that Gabriel recording from earlier, causing it to get all fucked up now. Just a really creative level that does not overstay its rather lengthy welcome. And to close out Wrath, we have to fight the worm. It's not easy to see at first, but getting up to the actual fight quickly is super easy, which appears to be a trend across Act 2 and the game in general. A trend that I like. Having to go through a Roblox obby every single P-rank attempt makes me very sad. So having to discover a secret instead of completing a test of platforming prowess to get back into the real meat and potatoes of the level is a real jerker offer. Fighting the worm, it's about as slippery as you would expect a ginormous demon worm to be. It sweeps low, it sweeps high, and it even flanks you. Of course, it is an aquatic creature, so going airborne makes its thrashing about mostly pointless. I did this by whip slamming, but now that we have the knowledge of instant rocket riding, you can kind of indefinitely drone strike the poor guy. You can also ride the Leviathan and wail on it, though this can get pretty janky when it switches attacks. Its weak point being along its top side does not help its case either, and I found this fight pretty easy. Another first try P rank, though I will say that the weak point multiplier was much higher before any patches, and that definitely carried me a little bit.
Dude, Gabe's gonna be mad as fuck!
HERESY pretty much embodies Gabriel's pure rage. It's not very subtle. The walls want to kill you, the drone music is shitting itself, clenching all of its muscles, wanting to kill you. Gabe even speaks to you at the end, letting you know how much he wants to kill you. Stylistically, it's the closest we've gotten to generic hell, but because it's tied into the plot and they're pushing the concept to the max, it doesn't feel generic at all. I've said before that the way the game looks graphically is kind of poopy, and it's much easier to appreciate the art direction. I've warmed up to the graphics since then, but Act 2 definitely makes its environments just look nicer by committing to its creative depictions of hell entirely. And I think HERESY is the shining example of that. It helps that it has emotional impact as a culmination of everything you've been through thus far. When I saw Swords Machine and Hideous Mask return in this level, I was screaming. I did not get either of those on the bingo card. Fuck, dude. And then it is paired with the music. These two songs seal the love letter to the game that 6-1 is writing. Maybe it doesn't take much to make me cry. You know, I know what a leitmotif is. That's all it is. But I was tearing up a little bit hearing Glory and Castlevania's melodies at the climax of the game. I didn't cry. Okay, I didn't cry. But I was close. By far, the best song in the game. Makes for a good montage, too. The level itself is great. As the climax, it gets to throw everything at you. Fuck you, here's a virtue a million miles away, and here's a dark room where the only reason you can find an enemy is because there's projectiles coming from that spot. And who else could be the final boss of HERESY, the final boss of Act 2, but Gabriel? He himself is considered a heretic, a traitor for somehow losing to a calculator. They even say HERESY 3 fucking times during the Act 1 end screen, and he is not happy to be here. The voice acting here is haunting. I was getting goosebumps hearing Gabe's rant. He is mad.
Of your profane form across the stars, I will grind you down until the very sparks cry for mercy. My hands shall relish ending you here and now.
The fight itself has similarities to his original encounter, of course, but it's varied enough to be fresh. It's a little disappointing that sliding around is still the dominant strategy here. But the difference in geometry with the stairs, how much faster he is, him having spinning swords to throw at you that you can actually parry, add up to a way cooler Gabe fight. And angrier. It took me a little bit to notice, but he starts the fight enraged. And then, this part I saw in a YouTube comment, the lights in Phase 2 change to blue and yellow, and Gabe drops his enraged status, because he's starting to rethink his perspective in the story. It's an inverse of the first fight, and enemies getting enraged in general. It's such a cool way of flipping a gameplay mechanic and aligning it with the character's story. It's just good. It's just good. Of course, Gabe is beaten again by a calculator, so he has to think about this one. And in his pondering, he decides to
Oh! What the hell?
Kill the entire fucking council.
Oh my god!
Act 1's ending text scroll did not really obscure where Gabe was heading mentally, but with this, I have no idea what Gabriel's next appearance is gonna look like. Is he gonna grow 3 times as big and crush V1? Is he gonna turn into a black hole and collapse everything? I mean, the title Godfist Suicide surely implies a grand finale of mass destruction. I don't know. It looks like this whole story is gonna observe Gabriel's arc into madness. V1 certainly isn't the main character, or much of a character at all. Doesn't speak, doesn't develop, unless you consider getting a rocket launcher and a new arm a character arc. Gabriel only speaks to you to let you know that you're worthless and mean nothing to him until he has that flipped on him and now you're the bane of his existence. I rarely care about stories in games unless it is the sole focus, but I am very biased to this game, so I am very curious to see what comes of it. The story doesn't end there though. Spoilers for P2 if that means anything.
5 months later.
Actually, with P2 came an ARG, which I actually participated in the first part of. Someone made a document to compile all the information and developments while the ARG was being solved in order to better coordinate. I, being one of many to have impressive knowledge on the subject, bestowed upon the document a great spraying of knowledge among other like-minded contributors.
Soviet penis. It's coming!
Shortly after, the document was deleted, collapsing in on itself trying to support the bulking mass of intelligence held by the community. Also with P2 came P2, a gauntlet of everything the game can possibly throw at you with an impossible boss to top it off. The gauntlet is genuinely insane in the greatest way possible. For a long time, the Cybergrind was the only way to see ULTRAKILL's combat pushed to its limits, simply because of the sheer volume of enemies and projectiles on screen. And I do play a lot of Cybergrind. With these encounters though, that limit has been matched and even surpassed. At least in the Cybergrind you have all this space to work with. Almost immediately, P2 puts you inside of the chloroplast of a plant cell but red, or that might be the chlorophyll actually, against 4 Cerberi and 2 Virtues, which will get mad after enough time, and there's a ferryman eventually for good measure. Hey, at least nothing was idled in there. Of course, we get an idled Mind Flayer, historically the most evil enemy in the game, made completely invulnerable. I actually hadn't died to the Mind Flayer or at all up to this point. In a total bonehead move, when I finished this encounter, I decided that the black void over here was the intended path and kept jumping into it. And died. Well, technically I died to the Mind Flayer, but whatever, go eat a brick. I definitely died to the 2 Mind Flayers though. This room is evil. Humblingly evil. Humbling back to a time where I didn't know any tech, could hardly handle the controls, and could only flounder about trying to make something of myself against the game's overwhelming options. Except now, I'm both burdened by the stress of managing myself and 2 of the most evil, unkillable enemies in the game on top of all the other evildoers in the room. There are no more insta-kill methods to lean on. You have to respect the Mind Flayers and there's nothing you can do about it. It feels impossible, but that's because I'm used to being able to blast through encounters by using tech that makes the game calculate a bunch of numbers. When that is stripped from me, when the tech is no more, I am nothing. I'm sorry, I think that room gave me brain damage. The rest of the level is a lot easier, to be honest. There are ways to conquer the evil here that do not require the same mental capacity that building a rocket does. The biggest competitor to the Mind Flayer duo might be the last room with the idled Stalker. This was the sinister exception. The most you can do to try to keep this guy at bay is bouncing him with the rocket launcher or ground slamming him so that he doesn't stand anyone particularly important. Unfortunately, with 4 sentries at you, or 3 Virtues, or just the hideous mass that's also idled, hi buddy, it's very difficult to manage. Luckily, thank God, this room is much more forgiving in its size, so you have a good amount of room to dodge whatever it throws at you as the trade-off for basically being unable to heal the entire time. The Gauntlet is definitely my favorite part of the level. It really helps that it's backed by an incredible track from Heejin Church. It fits the level really well, and it has a lot of drive packed into it to keep you moving forward despite the death counter's exponential growth. This section puts you in a lot of uniquely fucked situations that make what was once a varied and expansive toolset feel like 5 Nerf guns and the ability to walk in a straight line. And to be honest, that's all I wanted from this level. A complete and utter destruction of the senses, if you will. Fortunately, I got even more than what I wanted. 2 boss fights. Or more like 1.015 boss fights. I was actually sort of half expecting or hoping for a fake-out fight. It just seems like the logical next step since no one was expecting Flesh Prison to pop out in front of you. So to top that, you make a fight where it pops out. Or it dies because the boss it holds inside is so powerful. Apparently, Flesh Panopticon is planned to be expanded into a full fight on harder difficulties. I'm scared. Also, the music, again, is really good here. There's something about the bells and pandemonium that have me in a trance. Not sure what's going on with that. Anyways, the actual final boss is Red Minos, who's voiced by the same guy that plays the narrator role in Disco Elysium. As the narrator in that game, he's usually playing the straight man, or close to one, sometimes interrupting the straight with wit or cynicism. Of what I played anyways. Sisyphus is not the straight man. He is the kill man. He fights just to fight. His song is called War, because he goes to war with the council. He froths at the mouth thinking about killing people. He fights you because he thinks it's funny. So I'm very happy to say that the VA does a pretty good job exemplifying Sisyphus' character. You can hear a sense of conviction in his voice when he talks about heaven, but you can tell he's smiling as he imagines viscerally painting you into the ground. He's also really good at it. It's an unpopular stance, but Sisyphus is easily the hardest part of the level for me. Again, when I can't just pull tech out of my ass and win, I crumble into dust. A strong, agile, and tanky opponent that I have to patiently learn and react to is the #1 enemy of my monkeys. And I haven't really bothered to go back to the level and practice much after getting the sacred yellow marker. Also, he's just really fucking hard. Still, I can see the fun here, especially in how dominant parries are in this fight. Most of his attacks have parry windows, albeit often strange ones. So it's super rewarding to learn the right times to strike and take advantage of your noggin. Even when he goes into phase 2 and starts to look like Brian Family Guy, all his moves remain parryable, unlike Blue Sisyphus. I've seen a lot of people say that the fight is straight up easier parry only or with just the revolver because you can just focus on dodging his attacks and looking for an opening. And that way the fight might be parry dependent to a fault, but I still think it makes for a good tug of war between you and Orange Hunk over here. And that is P2. Pretty much all I wanted was my balls crushed, and I got that 10 times over. Prime Sanctums allow for a level of difficulty and insane use of gameplay elements that, at least right now, you won't get from the campaign. Unlike the Cyber Grind though, they're intensely designed and curated to be crushing but fair, and therefore a lot of fun. Whew, so that is ULTRAKILL's Act 2. And I didn't even talk about the secret levels, or all the crazy secrets in levels, or the new revolver that's really fun, or that they made Cyber Grind insanely hard now by basically giving enemies Devil Trigger, and now my PB is half of what it was, and I've been trying since the update came out to beat it, but I'm washed up, and I can't do anything. Despite that, it's still longer than any video I will probably ever make again. It feels wrong to have even compared Act 2 to Act 1 as much as I did, because even Hakita acknowledged how big the leap in quality is. It really feels like the team became completely certain about the direction they wanted to push the game. Everything that Act 1 did right, Act 2 doubles down on, and everything it did wrong, Act 2 finds some way to fix. In fact, my biggest criticism and worry with Act 2 is how sad and diaper-wearing it makes Act 1 look, and how it could be possible for Act 3 to top what has already come before it again. Though the future looks very bright for ULTRAKILL, with plans for a level editor, remixed versions of levels, the rest of the arsenal, and much, much more, all looking very promising. I can't imagine that it would just shit itself right before the finish line. I have put a lot of time into this game. I'm not a speedrunner, I'm not particularly good, I don't really like challenge runs all that much, I just play the game for what it's got over and over, and it makes me happy. If I didn't have a lot to say, I would be medically declared brain dead, and I'm very biased. It's very difficult to criticize a game when you put over 400 hours into it. It makes me even happier to share the game around and maybe see them experience even a fraction of the joy, a drop of the sweat and tears, a slice of the incredible vision the developers had. This whole thing isn't really a recommendation. With all the spoilers, if you've made it to this point without playing ULTRAKILL, go fuck yourself. It's more of a letter of admiration. I've not been this invested in a game ever. It's probably the first game I ever really tried to get good at, and it's opened my eyes to the wonderful feeling of constant improvement. Nor have I ever been this invested in a game's development ever. It's almost single-handedly introduced me to the world of indies. And I know I've been giving Hakita most of the sole credit for a lot of this game, but a lot more people than just Hakita have come together to make this game the joy that it is to play. The music, the level design, the core gameplay, all the stuff Hakita is responsible for is great, as I have probably made clear. But what keeps me intrigued, the art design, the concepts, the little features, the voice acting, the album covers, It's all great, and these people do deserve a little museum. I love pretty much every aspect of this game. I know it's not done, and I know I'm getting a little sappy here, but if this isn't my favorite game, I don't know what is.